Good afternoon and welcome to Eastern Creek in the running of the 5th 12-hour production car race in Australia. Eastern Creek is a brand new venue for the race and it brings with it its own challenges. This circuit, this 3.9 kilometre track, has been recently resurfaced, and compared to what it was, it is blindingly fast. But also, it is very hard on tyres. It is punishing on brakes, and it's absolute murder on the drivers who'll race here tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. The winning car tomorrow will cover more than 420 laps of this 3.9 kilometre circuit, and believe me, the work that the drivers will do to get the car round will be nothing short of phenomenal. Now, SBS Television this afternoon will bring you 2 hours of coverage of qualifying and practice for the 12-hour production race. Also, we have other races on the card: the Suzuki Challenge, the Porsche Cup, and indeed the 2-litre Touring Car Championship. We'll bring you news coverage of that. In central commentary for all of that and for the 12-hour tomorrow is Will Hagan.
Thank you, John Smales, and good afternoon and welcome to Eastern Creek. And the crowd indeed have welcomed the cars and the drivers and the competitors to Eastern Creek today, because pouring into the track this morning were many more cars and spectators than came to the race at Bathurst last year. Bathurst has a great magic about it. But this track for the competitors and for the vehicles is much more testing. It's a much busier track. I think it'll be harder on cars mechanically, and I think it'll be harder on drivers as well. And I think we'll see more failure of both, more error rate from drivers and more probably mechanical problems under stress and duress from cars. Alan Grice is a previous winner of the race and a man who's campaigned a bit at Eastern Creek, but very much at Bathurst. Bathurst, for all its aura, is nevertheless a track where you can, in some parts, relax quite a bit.
Yes, and normally the ambient temperature is cooler up there also, which is a lot easier on the cars, easier on the
ambient
drivers.
at the moment is crook.
Well, it is. It's very hot, and it's going to be hot tomorrow, we're told, and that really brings a whole new set of factors into play. Previous years, the temperature has always been a problem for the Mazdas because of their twin-turbo configuration, and as the water temperature goes up, the revs have to come down, therefore their lap times come down. But what we'll see tomorrow, I'm sure, is that if that occurs, as it's predicted that it shall, that the Porsches will all have to pull back too, because the Porsches are showing that they're much harder on rear tyres. So as the heat comes, they'll all have to be pulling the cars back, still racing as hard as they can, but keep all the temperatures intact, and it'll make a very tactical, clever race.
It's another interesting one, isn't it? I mean, if you look on paper, you look at the Porsche, the price, the pedigree and everything else, you say, oh, 3.8 litres, you know, the normal road engine taken out from 3.6, the Mazda, a little twin-chamber rotary. You think it can't match them, you know. It's not that far off on the times. The Porsche problem, if any, might be a smaller tank. We're not quite sure about their fuel consumption. And it's certainly about tyres, whereas the Mazdas appear to have no problem in that area.
No, I'd say that's right. The Mazdas don't have a tyre problem, and they've got a big tank. We know that from the specifications, but there's all sorts of foxing going on in the pits at the moment. Nobody will let anyone know.
It must be an important motor race.
Well, yes, they're hiding the amount of fuel that they put into the tank, so that nobody can calculate how many laps they've just done on a tank, or on that number of litres. So yeah, nobody really knows what the other's fuel consumption is, therefore they don't know when they're going to stop.
And the other side of it is, I think, that Alan Horsley, the Mazda team manager, and indeed the man that specified and supervised the building of these special RX-7 SP, special production cars, is a very shrewd tactician. And I don't think Porsche quite matches him in the managers that they have in their pit.
I think it's fair to say that in the last 3 years at the Bathurst 12-hour race, that Alan's managed to stay one step, maybe half a step ahead, and I'm sure he's got lots of plans to try and maintain that little edge.
Because he says he should have been beaten last year.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. But I think a whole lot of very interesting factors, and not least of which is the effects on the drivers.
And Alan, you've driven the Mazda around here. What's it like? I've driven it on the road.
Well, I drove it last night, and I didn't like it at all.
Not because of the light. Yeah.
Not the car, but the lighting here. Well, there's no lighting around the back of the track, but that's not unusual. Neither is there at Spa or Le Mans. But I couldn't pick up the white lines on the edge of the track, so you couldn't, at that speed, you couldn't tell where the edge of the track stopped and the dust started. And of course that's a recipe for some very interesting moments.
Very interesting moments. Well, we talk about race start, and we talk about when the race did start, which is back in 1991. And that in those days it was a Super Turbo that was the thing to have. And Alan, you were mixed up with them in those days.
Yes, I was in that motor car that won the very first one, and that was great.
It had an enormous margin.
Oh, well, it had very skillful drivers, Will.
That as well. And it was still in there the next year, but Mazda was coming on strongly and indeed won against some strong rivalry in a lighter car.
Yes, 92, 93, 94 for Mazda, and they're certainly pulling all stops out for 95.
So it was Mazda came in 92, took on the Toyota Supra, which was already out of production. Then in 93, with Mazda trying to repeat its first win, Porsche came in and chased them with the 968. Failed to do it in 93, got quite close, and then in 94 tried again, and in fact the winning number of laps in 94 was one less than in 93.
The Mazda Porsche comparison that you touched on, I think, is a very interesting one. The Mazda is half the price, less than half the price of the Porsche. The Porsche has all of the hereditary for putting race cars together that go very quickly for very long times. And yet, in the front of the Mazda, you've got this tiny little rotary engine. Dick Johnson yesterday made notice that the Mazda engine was about the same size as a starter motor on a V8.
Well, it's very true. And let's find out more about the Mazda in this little insight to what makes them go.
Well, I guess only the fact that the Mazda has won the last 3 12-hour races would we be termed as favourites, but I think that new Porsche really is a very, very, very good car, and also the BMW is a very good car. So, you know, the reason that Mazda are in motorsport is to prove their product, and, you know, let's hope that it happens again. 4 in a row would be nice. You can drive flat out on the track for your hour and a half or whatever you're going to do, and then someone mucks up the pit stop and you lose your lead. So it's very much a team effort, and the strategy comes into it in a long race, and Alan Horsley, who directs the Mazda operation, is a very good strategist, so I'm pretty happy to be in the Mazda team.
It's a total package. You've got to have the right drivers, you've got to have the right car, and then really importantly is the right team, the mechanics, the pit crew, everybody in the team. It's got to be absolutely spot on.
Indeed, it's Alan Horsley who's largely responsible for the Mazda success story. Out of the 4 12-hour races so far, Team Mazda have won 3. And as manager, Horsley knows just how crucial winning is.
Oh, it's incredibly important. It puts us in the forefront of technology in motor racing. We're beating marks like BMW and Porsche and Lotus. It's very, very important to us.
Horsley has handpicked some of the best endurance drivers in the business. With Dick Johnson, Mark Scaife and John Bowe in the cockpit, Mazda won't be lacking experience come race day. The biggest question concerning this camp, though, is the car. It's new and there's been some problems.
The only problem we've got at the moment is certainly with the tyres, because of the amount of fuel that these cars carry, like 110 litres of fuel in the back swishing around there. Really does work the back tyres around Eastern Creek, and where at Bathurst it probably wouldn't be so much of a problem, but that's one problem which I feel that we'll certainly overcome before the start of the race.
Well, there's a lot of weight in the back of the car. You know, when you put 100 litres of fuel in the back of any car, it changes the car. You know, it's like putting a passenger in the back. So what we're going to shoot for is a good handling balance with an empty tank or a full tank, and you know, we've made some inroads today already, and you know, I'm encouraged to look at what will happen when we get here.
But teething problems aside, this year's car is even quicker than the car that won last year.
Victory for the first time for Mazda.
Speaking of last year's car, this was how Scaife ended the day, pushing his machine to the limit, thus missing out on the champagne glory.
But a very hard...
Tactics this year, like the car, will be slightly modified, and success will hopefully follow.
It's a matter of balancing the speed with the fuel consumption and your brake wear, and as I say, it's very much a strategy race, and you can go out and go flat out all the time and use up the car much more. It's quite a, from a driver's point of view, it's a very interesting race because you have to think about it all the time.
Well, that's the make that's done it for the last 3 years, and they've done it against some very strong odds, and they've done it too because they're trying to lift the image of that car against the thoroughbred pedigreed German Porsche. They love being in against Porsche. They want to beat it, but equally, just being there, being seen to be competitive is very important for them in their overall marketing. So let's find out what they're up against in the Porsche camp this year, which really has unleashed its big guns.
No, I don't think we're unbeatable. The Mazda's had a good package for a fair while, and Porsche have probably been a little bit behind them. But I feel now that Porsche have got a better package than what they've had, and we're hoping that it's going to be better than the Mazdas.
The package referred to by Jim Richards is the 911 RS Club Sport, affectionately nicknamed by the Germans as the Stuttgart Stormer, the quickest car in Australian production racing.
I think the new 911 RSCS is probably the best car I've ever driven as a road car. The engineering, the technology that is in it is fantastic, but along with that, it's got that real Porsche reliability, and that's what's going to make the difference.
Porsche rivals claim the Club Sport is built specifically for racing, which is the reason they say why it's dominated the GT production series this year with some ease. Peter Fitzgerald, who along with Jim Richards will be behind the wheel for the factory team, though, disagrees.
They've had like a market niche in that sort of model for years and years. This particular car is really one of 1,100 that were built worldwide, and the RSCS, which this is actually 100 of that 1,100, and it's just 50 kilo lighter than the basic Tourer version.
There are in fact only 10 Club Sports in Australia pre-bought at $218,000 each, 2 of which are private entries in this year's 12-hour, driven by Jeff Morgan and Andrew Medicki respectively. And unlike the BMW and Mazda production cars, the showroom Porsche is only slightly modified for the track.
The RX-7's about 30% a race car, the BMW 50, and this is about 90 in the way it comes off the showroom floor. So when you get actually to the racetrack, though, it's a totally different kettle of fish. What you see on the racetrack is a Porsche that's only improved 10%.
Although there's been no stopping the Club Sport this year, Porsche with their 968 CS has had to play bridesmaid to the Mazda RX-7 over the past 2 years in the 12-hour. But if performances in this year's production series are a guide, 1995 will be the year of the German street burner. Unlike the Mazda philosophy of nursing the car to last the distance, you can be sure of one thing: the Porsche drivers won't be coming up for air come race day.
Well, really now the 12-hour is a matter of, if your petrol lasts for an hour and a half, you drive the car as hard as you can for an hour and a half, you change drivers, and he does the same. So although the 12-hour is a long race, it's virtually made up of a whole lot of sprint races.
Having said that, the Porsche 12-hour race strategy will be different to the GT production race plan. One pit stop in this race could be the difference between winning and losing.
We may find by dropping our lap time 1 to 2 seconds that we can actually cut out a pit stop. And that would be affected by, say, better pad wear or even better fuel consumption. We might decide we won't rev it to 6,800 revs, we'll rev it to 6, and that'll conserve us another pit stop. So those sort of strategies come into it. So they are really totally different events.
There's no denying Porsche power in 1995. Its whitewash of the GT production series speaks for itself. But whether that performance can be repeated in the 12-hour remains to be seen. If it can, production racing in this country may have turned a corner.
Well, that's what it's all about, this 12-hour production race, 4 years at Bathurst, now at Eastern Creek for the first time, and it will be a Mazda-Porsche confrontation. It should be a real beauty. I've heard people say, oh, it'll be a Porsche walkover, when Porsche drivers saw the Mazda Times the other day, they weren't so sure. But there are many other cars in it too, right down to everyday production, shopping type commuter cars. And we'll be looking at all of those through tomorrow's telecast as well as through today's preview of this 12-hour Eastern Creek production car race. But it's a big race program too, and there are other things on the program, indeed specific Porsche races, and also another one-make race for budding young Juan Fangio's or Ayrton Senna's. This is the Suzuki Cup, and this was the first of their 2 races that they'll have here at Eastern Creek. The first one, first on the program this morning at 10:15. We pick it up just part of the way through lap 1.
And they've had plenty of warm-up laps over the last couple of days for qualifying, but of course it all counts today. And a very different situation for these guys since they last were here at Eastern Creek. Not only has the track been resurfaced, but of course for the first time in this Suzuki Cup Series, the competitors are running on buffed tyres. Instead of running the standard tyres, the Kumho tyres have been buffed down. This has come about by the very grippy surface around here in Eastern Creek. The tyres are starting to delaminate and do all sorts of very nice things yesterday. So what we're finding, John Smales, is we're getting a lot more grip, or the guys are finding a lot more grip, but they've had to completely change their total situation as far as their race attitude is concerned. And speaking of race attitudes, I think we've certainly got a major race on our hands here. Okay, round the back of the circuit into turn number 3, and as is the case in Suzuki Cup racing, the high, wide and handsome, we've got this unbelievable stream of Suzukis using all of the track and then some, as we say, and a bit of rally crossing happening there as well. And the track might be a bit grippy, but some of the guys deciding that getting out on the sand is maybe not a bad way to look around as well. But when you've got several dozen cars that would appear all vying for the same piece of track, there's sure to be shenanigans as it was last time these cars were here.
In the lead is Philip Skyfleet. Behind him comes the race leader, Adam Clark. 2 of them now over the back of the circuit. Skyfleet going for every bit of advantage under brakes. Car 22. Behind him, 32 Clark. 1.3 litres, these cars, putting out 74 kilowatts of power. Look at the booze at the back of the circuit there. The circuit very recently resurfaced and widened, thankfully, for these Suzukis, as it turns out.
The famous hairpin around the corporate hill, making them 5 abreast. Not really a good idea, not in this early stage of the race, but of course, this first race of the day, it counts for grid positions. These cars are so max, very difficult to pass. So, of course, the further up the grid you can get, naturally enough, you're closer to the checker flag at the end of the day. But not surprisingly, the same or the familiar names are at the pointy end of the field. And here we go, this famous Eastern Creek affair, the slipstreaming, and it's certainly paying dividends for car 32 down the main straight. Adam Clark, the series leader, through that daunting turn 1, John Smales, 170 kilometres per hour, flat out in 5th in these little cars. It certainly need to tighten the seatbelt, I'm not sure too.
Paul Roman now slots into 3rd position, looking for the advantage behind, and then comes Andrei Pavicevic. Back in, there goes Roman, he's had the lose. Pavicevic just misses him. Car 6 is Roman. Rejoins the race in the middle of the field. My goodness.
Where's that traffic policeman when you need one? And number 2 has done it all wrong as well, but trying to get it together, keeps it off the concrete, but hardly backs off. It's Warren Luff. He's had a bit of a moment out there, but in true Suzuki Cup fashion, doesn't button off, just keeps it off the concrete wall.
Luff, of course, the son of Ian Luff, the driver-trainer. I think Warren certainly has learned a bit from his dad in terms of car control, because it was a good save.
Well, he had not a good run at Eastern Creek at his last appearance, and he's hoping, in fact, was hoping for a better run, quite obviously, because he had some dramas, was off the racetrack, but not having a good day today either. But meanwhile, the battle continues between the guys who've been basically doing battle and taking the battle up to each other all year. We've got spins all over this racetrack. It might be resurfaced, it might be grippier, but it's still certainly testing the guys. As I was saying, this great battle between car number 22, Philip Skyfleet, and of course car 32 as well, Adam Clark. That's been happening all of the year. They've been running at racetracks around or down the east coast of Australia. They've been to most of them twice. They've come back to Eastern Creek, but of course, as I said before, running on buffed tyres. It's given them a lot more grip, but when they let go much more quickly, as a lot of the drivers have been finding out in qualifying, and they're certainly finding out in this motor race.
Well, Christian Jones yesterday, the son of Alan Jones, Formula 1 World Champion, was one of those who found out when he rolled his car here on turn 1. He simply went out, purchased another motor car, is back in the race today, started from position 31, he's already up to position 17. Meantime, this is the battle for the lead. And Skyfleet just seems to have that little bit of an edge coming onto the chute. If you allow that the cars are absolutely even, that Skyfleet's entry onto the main straight here at Eastern Creek certainly was better than that of Clark, because he opened up just that little bit of a gap.
And it's made a difference as well, as we all know in motor racing, getting, particularly on long straights, getting the right entry onto the straight can mean 400 or 500 revs. Without getting too technical, it means more top speed. Of course, that means an advantage. So this is one of the longest gaps between first to second, certainly at the top end of the sharp end of the field we've seen so far this series. So Skyfleet really driving quite sensibly. Their buff tyres, as I said, give them more grip, and Skyfleet's thinking about his motor race, and you might note he's keeping the car relatively straight. As we speak, Adam Clark making another lunge at him. Adam Clark, of course, leading the series at the moment. There's still 2 rounds to go after the racing here at Eastern Creek today. But of course, it's important to at least stay where he is. I'm not sure that Adam Clark's going to put himself in danger or do anything silly, John. He's on the front row of the grid, as it were, for the point-scoring race later in the day. So if nothing else happens, I think he'd be quite happy to stay there and just say, OK, we're in second place. It would be nice to take the race win, but we're assured for front row grid position this afternoon for the next race. But he's still... having said that, he's still moving his car around a lot more than Skyfleet. This Skyfleet, as you can see, these cars really leaning in the left-hand front corner, the right rear wheel getting light and locks up. Not a big drama because it's not under load. It's certainly Clark's trying hard, and I think he has to, because Pavicevic has got ideas. He's got designs on second clearly, because his gap has come down just a second, 1 second on that lap from his third position. As you can see there, he's still a little ways behind, and we're still about halfway through this motor race. It is a sprint race. It's a very warm day here at Eastern Creek for being an early part of the morning. So the guys will be certainly know that they're doing a motor race, because they certainly don't have the air conditioning on. These little 1.3 litres, John, you'll be having everything shut down. You need every kilowatt you can get around this racetrack. 5 speed, and they use third gear around most of the corners as we see them now. 5th gear flat as a attack around this left-hander. One of the fastest race corners in Australia. Probably the only one that's faster would be the Caltex Chase Bathurst, but as far as the shorter circuits are concerned, it is a daunting corner, particularly in a little car like this, when it's got 1.3 litres, about 74 kilowatts. And there, that's a spectacular shot there, again, showing how the car's unloaded, the left-hand rear wheel locked up, but not a drama. There was no blue smoke coming off it because it wasn't touching the ground.
And that's Andrei Pavicevic, of course, who's now in third position. He's running just over a second behind the race leader, Philip Skyfleet. Adam Clark in second position. Skyfleet so far the fastest driver in the race at 2:01.4 seconds. He's almost 0.2 of a second faster than Clark. Oh, there goes Pavicevic. Got it held.
He did very well. That was over the back. I guess it'll be about turn 5. And
but just watch him now being swamped by the other fields as they come through. Bit of a touch there.
A bit of a racing incident, you might say. Damon Hill knows all about those. Of course, the car 13, that was Robson. A big improver. This young guy has been getting quicker and quicker over the last couple of rounds. In fact, that's pretty much been the story for all of the guys. Okay.
And let's have a look at the replay of the lose of Pavicevic. And it was quite a save of Pavicevic as he worked at it.
Closing up at the sharp end of the field. That certainly perhaps inspired the guys running in 4.56 in the part of the top 10 to maybe try just a little bit harder. But Skyfleet driving very, very well, keeping the car very straight. Of course, straight is fast. It's not necessarily spectacular. So here's car 13 coming around, all of the vehicles coming around now to get the last lap sign. It's been a pretty interesting sort of race, and this conga line of Suzuki's down the straight again. A pretty handy gap for our race leader. It's still Philip Skyfleet ahead of Adam Clark, and a fair gap back to Pavicevic. He's under
Here
all
he
sorts
comes
of pressure.
now, coming out to pass car 13, Anthony Robson. Up alongside on the outside of the circuit. That's a very, very brave move, because these cars are doing about 170. Pavicevic's got to go. He's got the tyre. Can he get it back? Collected over, collected into the dirt. Now, this is just a little bit dodgy. He's got it almost held and saved. Well done, Andrei Pavicevic, but you put yourself right into the middle of the pack now for the second round of the Suzuki GTI Challenge this afternoon.
Big lose there for Pavicevic. That's what we're talking about. 170 kilometres per hour, flat out in 5th gear, and you have a lose. You're really a passenger. You just have to hang in there and try and do all the right things, and it's exactly what he did. He kept it off the fence. That's what didn't happen, unfortunately, for Kristen Jones the other day. So at least he's having a go. He certainly can't taken away from him.
All season long, the stewards have been having a go at these guys about...
Speaking of Christian
yes,
Jones, John, there he is.
There he is. Christian's off the track again. That's the Scott Anderson car that Christian took over. So not a good weekend for Christian. As we look at about half a lap now remaining to the conclusion of this, the first of 2 heats of the Suzuki GTI Cup. And there's your race leader now, car 22. Philip Skyfleet, a leader from start to finish, hard challenged by Adam Clark now, who knows he's got less than half a lap to take over Philip Skyfleet. And he does seem to be pressing on a bit in the braking area, doesn't he? As he has been all race long, Moody.
Yes, he does. But I think Philip Skyfleet is certainly, he's got this race in the bag. He's driven very, very well. Very straight and a very cool and canny race. And certainly Clark's been taking it up with him. He's been jumping in there under brakes. But I think Skyfleet is just backing off a bit. He's just looking after his tyres in his car, keeping it straight. He's got a pretty handy lead here. He's still 2 car lengths ahead. That's all he needs. Certainly there's no chance of a slipstream here. So Philip Skyfleet, a great way to open his day here at Eastern Creek and his 7th round of this Suzuki Cup, the Kumho Suzuki Cup. Here he comes now, 200 metres to go, checkered flag at the ready, and checkered flag for Philip Skyfleet takes the race win here at Eastern Creek today, ahead of Adam Clark, the series leader. Won't do his chances any harm at all. So there's your front row for this afternoon. Big finish for Robson, followed by Luff and Rick Shaw, and then Paul Roman, then Simpson, then Pavicevic. No, it's not. Of course, he's going down the leaderboard because of that drama he had before. So Pavicevic, certainly the guy trying the hardest there, but a very heady, cool and calm race by Philip Skyfleet.
Well, Skyfleet won the first of the races held for this series this year, but that's only his 2nd victory in 14 races. Adam Clark's won plenty and set a new lap record in that race. Robson's come on very strongly in recent times. Warren Luff had a stop-go, but I'm delighted in looking at the second half of the results to see that name in 10th position, and make me a bit nervous when we see that race shortly here on SBS Sport.
The long straight at Eastern Creek will see plenty of action over the next 24 hours. Welcome back to a weekend of great motorsport action here in the west of Sydney, culminating tomorrow, of course, in the 12-hour Production Classic, the 5th running of that race in Australia. And you've got to say that the Mazdas and the Porsches are the cars that everyone's turning their attention to at the moment. But there's stories around already of the weaknesses that might affect both cars. Co-commentator in the pits tomorrow is Ian Campbell. And Ian, what weaknesses are you hearing about? I mean, they've got to be scurrilous rumours, but what do you hear?
This hot, blustery Saturday afternoon is already bringing many stories, as you've said, but especially from the top 2 camps. And that's essentially with Mazda. There's been a bit of home engineering, if you will, with the intercooler. What we've got there simply is a spray being generated here, a part that normally would have been brought from Japan, but had been engineered by the Horsley team here. They're hoping that's going to work from this weekend.
Are you saying, Ian, that the chances are if it doesn't work, that the car could detonate? That's the word around the pits, but obviously spread by teams other than Mazda.
Oh, you know, that is a definite probability that they will have problem with that part. But let's talk about Porsche for a moment. They've got problems, as we understand it, with the brakes. Today, the weather uncustomarily hot, the wind's blowing, the tyres are the other thing that we've got to watch. Vulcan tyres, essentially, for the Porsches. Can they do the job at the end of the day? We haven't got the answer to that. Only time will tell. And, of course, the other thing is the endurance here of the drivers is going to be tested also through their night skills. Last night we had a practice, and Alan Grice, I think, when he writes his memoirs, will be putting down last night's effort as part of that. And I think you should pick up on that one.
Well, Ian's dead right on that. Last night, Grice, going out in his first session of practice, was heading up the back of the S's when cars coming into the circuit, that is spectators' cars coming into the circuit, shone their lights directly at him. Grice thought they were on his racetrack and immediately braked to a halt, a panic stop to a halt. Now, night racing here is a definite thing. Starts tomorrow at 6 a.m. Dawn is at 6:10, so the drivers for the first 10 minutes will be driving in absolute darkness. And Will Hagan, there's nothing out the back of this circuit to show them which way the track goes, is there?
Well, there's not only no lights, but the circuit cuts back on itself and nips and tucks. So it doesn't sort of flow on like one long road off into the distance like Bathurst does. As I say, this nips and tucks, comes back on itself. Sometimes from one part of the track you can see cars over on another part of the track. So the whole thing can get very confusing. And when you're going as fast and as hard as these guys go, it means you can't really play caution. You can't really slow up. You might see the brakes glowing the red there because we certainly could see them even when they were stationary in the pits some 30 seconds or more after they'd come into the pits. It really is a spectacular part of motor racing, a very special part that you get only, of course, in obviously special night races or 12-hour races that tend to cover that bit. We won't see probably absolute dark as it was there, but there's been 2 night qualifying sessions and a lot of drivers have been really spooked by it. But we talked too of the Mazdas and the Porsches and the outright contenders, and we'll catch up later too with why BMW isn't here. BMW, I think, was frightened by the opposition, but one that wasn't, one that's backing up again this year, dead keen to go and with some very hot drivers, is the Swedish Volvo.
It's an event that you've got to look at and say, okay, now number 1, we've got to finish. Number 2, we'll try and win our class. Number 3, we'll try and finish somewhere in the outright results. And so you work on that plan.
The 850 T5R is tipped to take honours in the sedan class come race day. And with Peter Brock once again heading the Volvo team, along with Tony Scott, Ed Ordinsky and Britain's Win Percy, it's a formidable lineup in anyone's book.
You go very fast, very smoothly, with a level of mechanical sympathy. If you feel something is not quite right, the car doesn't feel like it can handle it, back off a fraction. You've got to really be driving with a sense of feeling for the machinery rather than just pressing on and hoping for the best.
Realistically, the best that Volvo can hope for in a 12-hour is a class victory. Competing against the might of Porsche, Honda and Mazda is simply not on their agenda. Team manager George Shepherd.
No, we're not competitive against them over a short distance or a long distance. They're a thoroughbred sports car and we're racing a genuine 4-door sedan road car. We don't expect to be competitive in outright against them. There will be certain ones of them will have problems, and if we don't have any problems and we have a good day and someone else has a bad day, you can finish in front of them, but we're setting out to win the category of which we're entered in.
The 850 T5R has proven itself in the GT production series. Modifications including an aerodynamics package and improvements in suspension, tyres and transmission, coupled together with Volvo's reliability, make this car extremely competitive.
Generally it feels very nice. I would probably suspect that at somewhere like Bathurst it would be 6 or 7 seconds a lap quicker than last year. It is a lot easier on tyre wear. It feels a lot more comfortable, and it also stops very well this year.
Of course, Volvo's pedigree is safety. It always has been and always will be, and the 850 is no exception. But race day means fast pit stops, and drivers put their lives in the hands not only of manufacturers, but also of mechanics.
When you take off from the pits and drive the car flat out here at Eastern Creek round to turn 2, towards that concrete wall at top speed, you've got to trust everyone who's done things up on the car, put the wheels on. Every single aspect is trust the whole way.
Apart from excelling on the racetrack, the 850 has also accelerated Volvo's changing image. Once renowned as the sedan for lawn bowlers, the marketplace now recognises this car and the longer wheelbase wagon as one of the cars of the 90s. And although he still enjoys the thrust of V8 power, Peter Brock admits that this type of car, in this type of race, is where he likes to be.
There is not enough showcases for the purveyors of exotic machinery. I mean, machinery which is the best that we can build on the planet at the moment. And it's great to be out there on a track such as Eastern Creek, which has got fabulous facilities, and driving amongst all these exotic cars. It really is quite a unique event.
Been lots of talk of things like Ferraris for this 12-hour race. A thing that's trying to be a Ferrari for a number of years has been Honda's little supercar, its NSX Coupe. Of course, Wayne Gardner a couple of years ago at Bathurst was absolutely heroic in the way that he tried to qualify the car, the way then that he raced it, and indeed raced it at the end in a hastily repaired car that had also done its clutch. So he was doing clutchless gear changes. This is the very same car that's also done at Targa Tasmania, the Honda NSX.
The NSX is an absolutely brilliant road car, but it was built to be a road car and not a race car. Basically, we're running against cars now that are purpose-built race cars. The Mazda have built 20, specials that are race cars. The Porsches are, there's only 100 of those built, and the NSX is still a road car, so it suffers badly in having very small tyres and very small brakes.
The Honda NSX is probably best described as the beast on wheels. It's black, mean and oozes with power. But where it may lack in speed against the Porsche and Mazda, it'll more than make up for in reliability.
Definitely in reliability. The Honda's very, very strong and it's very reliable, and we can match it in straight line speed, but that'd be about where we could match it with the other two.
The NSX was considered way ahead of its time when first released in the early 90s. Greg Crick has decided to keep with tradition than to update to a newer model.
Simply because we can update that car to the new car. It's basically the only difference is they have larger wheels and tyre package on the new car, but the problem we've got at the moment is that we simply can't get tyres to fit the new rims.
Simple as that?
As simple as that, and it is a big disadvantage. It would make the car substantially quicker.
Look at the Formula One-inspired NSX and you'll find a new traction control system, a more powerful VTEC engine and the world's only aluminium monocoque production car. The mystique and tradition of Bathurst will be lost to the 12-hour race in 1995, but the more modern Eastern Creek track will provide new challenges for leading drivers.
Well, I think Bathurst has got a certain aura about it. I love racing at Bathurst and I look forward to the Tooheys 1000 every year. I would as sooner be racing definitely at Bathurst, but the race is at Eastern Creek and it's going to be the same for everyone, and I think Eastern Creek's a great track anyway.
The 12-hour race marks the return of one of the world's sporting legends. At 69, Sir Jack Brabham may not be the driver he once was, but his affinity with Honda goes back a long way.
The Honda NSX, of course, I have driven before, and I drove it in the Targa one year, and I think it's a very nice sports car and a very safe sports car, and I'm looking forward to driving it, and I think we'll finish up with quite a good result at the end.
The man's an absolute legend. He was probably Australia's best-known sports hero, along with Bradman. So, I think he can still drive very well and he'll do a good job, I'm sure.
Put Sir Jack behind the wheel of any car and you're almost guaranteed success.
To date, I haven't felt that I've lost anything. My reflexes and everything are just as good as they were 20 or 30 years ago, and I really don't have a problem. And I think really it just comes down to the personal attitude of the individual, of how long he can keep himself in the groove.
The Black Beast is set to turn heads at Eastern Creek. The endurance of the 12-hour race expected to work to the Honda's advantage.
We're really realistically expecting a good, reliable run, and I think at the end of the day, we could quite easily be in the top 3 or 4 cars.
I don't know why I'm smiling. This is nervous dad time because it's the second Suzuki race and young Hagan, Toby, is starting from 10th grid position, but behind Philip Skyfleet, who won that last race, because they start in this race for points and for prize money. It's the only race really that counts. They normally have 2 practice, 2 qualifying and then 2 races. This being the second race. This was their fastest lap time in each of the races this morning. Adam Clark got the new lap record, 01.1. And that's the top 6. And the way that they'll line up, there's some good runners there. And Damien White's a very strong runner in 31, believe me. He pushes people from behind. Tim Shaw's a hard man too in 26. Darren Palmer, he's got a lot of experience, a lot of money behind him. Andrei Pavicevic, you've seen how hard he goes. He had 2 big losers in that last race, one of the great adventurers. But they're all ready now and about to blast away. So it's a top field, minus Scott Anderson, who sold his car to Christian Jones. So 31 becomes 30, and they have 2 rounds after this. Sandown next weekend, and then Bathurst a month later. It's been an incredible series. 29,000 for the car, transported to all the meetings, fettled by Automotive Group Training that's based here at Eastern Creek, and panel beating and other repairs done very cheaply. Michael Simpson in car 12 had a mechanical problem yesterday, and the boys ripped into it and got his car ready. One car just coming late onto the grid, but all now in readiness with pole position Skyfleet on the inside, and the rest of the field all formed up. See the red headlights of young Toby, who gets away there, the 3rd of the white cars, or the 3rd car that we can see, but they're storming away in front of him, 4, 6, 8, probably about holding his grid position, and Adam Clark into the lead in 32. This corner's taken at about 170, and already one clambering out of almost the pit lane exit road. And, whoa, it's on right in the middle of the pack. It's Luff. Gone in 2. And round the outside of him, 19's Jonathan Muir. He was off there yesterday, and in fact his boot lid came open. And look at what a nice little thing it's done for Adam Clark. And 2 others, well, still in 19, Muir was in problems, and then Christian Jones. He's had a very bad weekend. I watched his rollover the other day, and sending out into the wall innocently is Paul Roman, who's come back and created further mayhem. And Field, and he was a top finisher in the previous race, a Formula Ford, ex-Formula Ford driver from South Australia, and a very good runner and nice kid too. And very bad luck to see him getting carved out like that. Let's have a look at this replay and see all that happened in the top few kilometres. Firstly, a touch and a lose, right in the middle. Second car hit by, I'm not sure whether it was Rick Shaw or others, but you can see the mayhem through the dust. And everybody trying to get through. And that's the sort of thing you have to escape if you're to finish well in a Suzuki race. Sea soaring and yawing everywhere with Jonathan Muir, but out of it, Adam Clark, Mr. Clean. And Skyfleet on his tail. 2 little jockeys. Skyfleet is very light. They're in there sort of around 50 kilos, these guys, and renewing the battle that they had in the first race. But quite frankly, if Skyfleet can get past Clark now that Clark's got the jump and the lead, he'll be going well. But let's watch them. You're impressed with Eastern Creek, but also with these Suzuki races, Dave, which I think you're seeing for the first time.
I'm indeed, just see them live. I've seen a little bit of them, and I was quite impressed this morning, although from what I've heard about preceding reputations, I thought they basically kept their noses clean and were quite well behaved at the sharp end of the field, but certainly plenty of shenanigans, as one would expect in the midfield.
It gets crazier as it goes on, and this race inevitably produces real mayhem, because it's the one, as I say, where they earn points, where they earn the prize money, and it's $50 a point. And so it's $1,000, it's 20 points for first place. So it's pretty reasonable money for cars that cost only $29,000. Clark must be doing very well out of this. His father, Roger, a former Speedway man and racer, and looks after the car. And I have to say it's probably the best presented car in the grid there. There's Simpson I was talking about earlier in car number 12, a good runner from Queensland, races HQs. Still racing them, in fact. He said there was too much biffo in that category, so I came over here, and there's no less, I can tell you. And they've been a bit horrified. He got badly treated up at Lakeside when they went up there. Took a corner off his car, running into a spinner.
Now that's close motor racing.
That is, and it's Rick Shaw in the middle of the sandwich in car number 15. And just in front of them in 13 is Anthony Robson. He had the fastest lap at Winton in the last round, and second place to Adam Clark. He suddenly really shone. He's always sort of been in there, but he started to produce the goods. Rick Shaw in the middle of that in 15, all but rolled his car at Lakeside. The left wheels were, without exaggeration, getting somewhere towards 2 metres off the ground. Doesn't mind a bit of biffo, as Simpson fields it.
Yes, Rick Shaw's been doing that the last 3 or 4 corners. He certainly wants to press on.
And one of the most adventurous men in the field is Pavicevic in car number 17.
Probably adventure this morning and Rick straight at
Well, I was watching him down and off the straight yesterday, and he was often getting a little bit of a lose up there, a part lose, and where other drivers it would have been more dramatic. He's very quick onto it to correcting it. He wasn't quite quick enough onto it today. He is a very hard runner, a very adventurous charger, Andrei Pavicevic. He runs a production Suzuki as well as running in the 12-hour, as also is Adam Clark and Warren Luff. So they go round to complete 2. Skyfleet and 22 from Clark, from Robson, Simpson, Shaw, Pavicevic, Nesbitt, Hibbard, Luff and Hagan, one says proudly. Further back, of the ones that we sort of expect something of, Tim Shaw in 26 is a fair way down, he's 21st. Journalist Barry Lake is just behind him in car number 1, and no sign of Christian Jones. This is a big battle. This one for Simpson 12 in 4th place, Shaw 5th place, Pavicevic in 6th at 17. Nesbitt, he's another hard runner. He just keeps laughing, he keeps biffing his car, damaging it, and very cavalier, Anthony Nesbitt in number 23. And a couple of rounds into the series, as we see Pavicevic dive under Simpson, and Simpson comes back at him, tries to come back at him, does well. And there's Robson in 13. Followed by Rick Shaw. Pavicevic comes out on top of Simpson, 17 from 12. Coming up towards Corporate Hill. When they turn left around Corporate Hill here, and I've driven them here, they just start wheel spinning. They break into total wheel spin, downhill there. So what you've got to do is try to get the drive on them and just feather it enough that they actually drive down there, jump on the picks, get into second gear, haul it in tight here, pretty hard to do it, to get them in to the apex of that corner. And you see the mayhem and close company behind them. The cars take an absolute pummeling. The tyres, as we were saying in the first race, have now been buffed back so they don't carry anything like the depth of tread that they have had on them previously. Skyfleet building well in 22 ahead of Clark in 32. Skyfleet's well down in the series, but Clark heads it. And
Skyfleet very strong early in the series, Will.
Yes, he won the first race, but didn't win the second one then at Oran Park. And a lot of people were settling in. Christian Jones, for instance, was learning how to change gears. He'd never done it before. He'd raced karts. He'd never had a gearbox to fiddle with.
Remarkable.
But he did a lot of practice at Lakeside with a fairly competent father, world champion Alan Jones, teaching him a lot about racecraft and so on. And there you see the bunch that takes us back to 10th place, and in fact about 12th, 13th, 14th, which would be Howard. Howard in number 20 from Darren Palmer in 18, Nigel Stones in 21. And here, oh dear, nice to see him doing well. I do get nervous about him. I got very nervous yesterday on the first turn. He went out behind Christian Jones, son Toby, and not far in front of him, Christian had his big lose, he rolled his car, and a lot of people having a lot of adventure there, including son Toby, who generally pacifies his father by driving fairly sensibly and within himself, but he had a lose at the end of the straight, total lose at about 170, but kept it on the bitumen and pulled up on the bitumen, unlike Christian, who'd gone out wider earlier and got tipped up and virtually wrote off a car. But these are the race leaders. Skyfleet from Adam Clark, 22 from 32 and doing a good job.
Yes, and Clark definitely making inroads, but sort of almost seen one take two from this morning. Skyfleet was driving very straight, very neatly, and I think rather than Clark making inroads, I think Skyfleet's just coming back to him a little bit. I think he's just taking it a bit easier. He has his measure, still has a couple of car lengths. When he starts getting close attention, we're talking Biffo type attention, I think there may be something to worry about. As we see there, he just pulls out a couple of car lengths again.
The feature part of it, Suzuki Racing is partially the fathers around. Alan Jones drifts in. Skyfleet's dad, who's known as Digger by everybody in the camp, and who's rumoured to get thirsty from time to time and certainly loves a smoke. And Roger Clark, on the other hand, in car 32 is always sort of throwing a towel over the car and keeping it absolutely immaculately clean. They come from up Maitland Way.
What I like about this class is it is a one-mark series, and we've seen some pretty good drivers come out of these sorts of things. Tony Longhurst from the Alpha series, Mark Skate from the Laser series, and so on it goes. And we're showcasing some pretty good talent.
I can tell you from trying to mix it with these guys at Winton, they go very, very hard, and that's whether you're at the front of the field, where it's fairly obvious you're going quickly and hard, but even at the tail end. If you're only a second or two off the pace of these guys, and 2 seconds covered the field at Winton, 2 seconds covered the first 6 on a very similar lap time in the Hungarian Grand Prix. These guys really do hammer hard, and they've worked out very well how to compromise in trying to get grip and not to give away too much sliding and loss of power and wheel spin in these front-wheel drive cars that really break into wheel spin very easily.
Forgive my wry smile that you can't see your analogy about the Hungarian Grand Prix. Very interesting. The Suzuki GTIs. We're on the last lap. We have about a quarter of a lap to go. Skyfleet looking fairly comfortable, as he was this morning. Clark's car's moving around a little bit more. He's doing what race drivers should do, and that is to try maximum attack, 100% right until the end, and that's exactly what he's doing. But only a couple of corners to go now, and Skyfleet has had the measure of everybody today. Very neat there, and as I speak, he just drifts a little bit, just gets the tail moving. Well, down into Corporate Hill corner for the last time.
Yeah, they get very busy down there. As I said, they break into wheel spin the minute you turn into that corner. You have to square them up and settle them and get on the picks, get into second gear and scream them out of here. You take them up to 7,500 revs just about every time you change a cog. You've got to be very careful on a change from second to third as well. Really guide the lever across. You can't just drop it up into neutral and then push it forward again.
One corner to go.
Yes, in this 5-lapper. And previous lap was 0.67 of a second between Skyfleet and Clark, 1 to 2. And it looks like another victory for Skyfleet, 2 on the day. Clark was the first to do that. It took him about round 3 to do it, to win 2 races in the day. But Philip Skyfleet's doing it here in car number 22, doing a good job. The 18-year-old student from Five Dock in New South Wales over Adam Clark, the Suzuki race leader, as they come to the finishing line. And he's done a very good job and continues to lead the series, as in behind him should be Anthony Robson in 13, Michael Simpson in car number 12, Warren Luff, who recovered to come in 5th in car 2, Rick Shaw 15 followed him, Nesbitt in 23, Burford in 4, Hibbard in car number 5, and then I thought I was going to leave Toby Hagan out because he'd slipped to 11th, regained 10th on the final lap to pick up 1 point and $50 for 10th in car number 30. So a good run by Philip Skyfleet there by, you can see, a very slender margin, pretty substantial gap back to Anthony Robson, who had fairly close company, and certainly Michael Simpson did, with Warren Luff only a tad over a second behind him. And look at the close company there in the pair, Rick Shaw and Barry Nesbitt, and then in the next trio that round out the top 10 in this Suzuki GTI race, the Kumho Suzuki Series, which was the point scorer down in the pits, telling us more about this Eastern Creek 12-hour. John Smales.
And Will, the theory of production car racing is that you ought to be able to drive the race car to the circuit, take off the number plates to confuse the hire purchase company, and then go racing for 12 hours. But Alan Grice, it's not quite that simple, is it?
Well, it's not that simple if you want to win, John. There's a lot of other things that you can do in the regulations. Tyres are a classic example.
Yeah. Let's have a look at all this, Alan. In front of us, a confusing array from the Mazda team.
This one on the right-hand side, on our right, is a wet tyre. As you can see, big sight marks, deep tread, softer rubber and a softer construction.
To be used when, Alan?
Only in the wet, and we're unlikely to see that in Sydney for a little while, unfortunately. This is a new dry tyre. That is, it's still brand new, about 5 or 6 millimetres of rubber, but that is too unstable. These blocks will actually move with the stresses of racing and cornering. So what we do is put them in a buffing machine, just like a lathe, and a cutter cuts 3 millimetres off the brand new rubber. So you just throw that in the bin, and then you've got 2 millimetres of rubber to start the race with.
Now, this tread pattern is the most unusual thing you've seen in a long time. What is it?
Principally, it's to make the tyre legal, because these are street tyres and they have to have enough sight marks in them to be a legal tyre. But then they get on the car and they're run and they're used, and they get down to being almost as slick. You can see how hot that tyre's been. These pieces of stone are really deeply embedded, hard to get out. They get very hot.
So while it's a production car tyre, it comes very close to a race organisation.
Yes, it does. The same sort of feel, the same sort of durability, particularly. You find that if you try and stress a completely standard road tyre the way these are stressed, the actual movement of the tread will overheat and throw big holes out.
Every hour 10, you'll change 4 of these on the Mazdas?
Definitely.
Now, what else do you change on them?
Well, again, with your road car, if you want to change the pads, your mechanic just changes these blue little items here, the brake pad itself. But that's too slow. If you want to win the race, the fastest way to do it is to change the whole disc rotor and the caliper and the pads already set up and pressurised. And what we have here is a dry brake system. So that the caliper is already pressurised and ready to put the brakes on. The whole item, a front set left, front set right, and the same for the rear. And the rears go on just like that. Already, the pads are in, brand new, hot, cold calipers, cold pads, all ready for another hour and something or other, but we don't know how long that is yet.
It's easy to say, however, that these ones go on cold, but what about the 500 degrees centigrade hot ones that come off?
500 degrees centigrade plus, when all of those nuts and bolts come off and the discs and calipers, they come off with Nomex gloves and they drop straight into a tin. And you'll see that's where part of the teamwork comes in. They go into the tin and out the back.
And the answer is they go into the tin really quickly, believe me. We'll be back after this break at Eastern Creek. Welcome back to Eastern Creek, and the genesis of these cars that are racing tomorrow in the 12-hour production car is the GT Production Car Championship, which runs throughout the world. GT cars have always been rich man's toys. They've been things to enjoy on the Nürburgring and at Watkins Glen in America and all over the world. And they race here, of course, in the 12-hour production race. This year, uniquely, there's been a GT Production Car Championship in Australia. Won, of course, by Jim Richards in the car he bought himself to go racing. His Porsche 911, a car which today is acting as spares for the vehicle he's sharing with Peter Fitzgerald. Next year, that series has been so popular that next year it'll become a national championship. With me is the Chief Executive of Procar Australia, Bill West. And Bill, why take it to a national title?
Because it gives the drivers like Jim Richards the opportunity to be able to sell themselves into all kinds of car series, and of course the manufacturers want their cars to be recognised worldwide.
I said earlier that it was a rich man's toy, very much Porsches, Mazda, well, to Mazdas to a degree, certainly the Lotus are regarded that way. Will it be that way in a national title, or will it become really professional?
It will become really professional. The field of entrance will be widened. You'll get Ferraris at the top of the field, but you'll be bringing in the 2.5 litre front-wheel drive cars underneath them. So you'll get a much broader spread of genuine GT production cars straight off the showroom floor.
How big a field are you looking at?
We've already got 30 people signed up for next year.
And the good news is, of course, it's going to be on SBS television.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to signing up a deal with you for a weekly hour program to cover GT production cars, which is very exciting.
So it starts here in Australia, but as I said, GT production cars run throughout the world. There are Ferrari championships running. What's your hope long term for the GT production series?
Well, long term we want to take it nationally. We've already got a lot of interest from Asia, certainly from Hong Kong. Next year we'll be doing something serious with the Asian series, combining ourselves with them.
So what sort of drivers are you going to bring into it? I mean, is this something that Dick Johnson, Peter Brock, Mark Scaife, for example, Glenn Seaton, can find their way into?
Well, absolutely. All the names you've just mentioned are the people that we're currently negotiating with, and I know the manufacturers are currently negotiating with to drive with us next year. It's particularly exciting for them because we run with the Super Tourer series, so all those drivers have the opportunity to drive in both.
Bill, when you hear people talking about the amount of money that they need to run their touring cars, is there enough money in Australia to do all this?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't want Mr. Keating to be watching this show, but I can guarantee you there's plenty of money out there for this kind of racing.
Well, certainly tomorrow you're going to see some sensational racing here, and as I say, it's the start of better things to come.
Well, better things to come includes a lot of things on this afternoon's program. We have Porsches coming, and we have an interesting new series for Commodores, the RH Wheels Commodore Cup. 4.2 litre V8s, but also some 5 litre V8s in there. and we're going to see them very shortly. And David Rose, it's quite an interesting series, a new concept this year, mainly on the east coast of Australia. And you've, I think, kindly said a thinking man's a more expensive version of HQs. Is that a fair description?
Pretty much. So that's how it came about. Some former HQ racers decided they'd like a little more power and that famous and wonderful V8 sound and a bit more of a challenge. So that's exactly what they did. It's a control formula they have for control engines, control suspension, tyres and wheels, and interestingly using American Hoosier tyres.
So it's a road racing version of Oscars, is it? Is that another way of looking at it?
Yes. I think it's a very good analogy, yes.
And so what sort of money to get a car competitive in this?
I'm told about $35,000 for what we call a brand new car. Obviously it isn't, but supplied sure, but with brand new mechanical componentry, drive away, ready to race, $35,000, which is not bad when you look at the lap time.
If old cars really lived, I reckon they'd start shaking the minute somebody approaches them with sign writing, because you know you're just about, when you want to retire and you deserve a peaceful life, you're just about to have a very tough time. But they're coming out now and gritting up, so David, tell us more about who's done what and what the lap times are like.
Well, the lap times for the guys at the pointy end are 1 minute 49, and we look at the 12-hour cars, these exotic Porsches and things, the $218,000 Porsches are doing 1 minute 39 to 40, so it's probably a 9 or 10 second deficit. But there's our grid. Stephen Carlos for the 1 minute 49, he's on pole position, a Victorian in fact. It's a fairly representative or eclectic field geographically. Gary Baxter is on the second row in his machine. Third is Phil Timmins, the time of 1:50. On the fourth grid position, second row, of course, Vince Gatt, one of the original runners in this category. He's from New South Wales. Alan Mann from New South Wales also.
It's a very famous name. It's not the same Alan Mann that used to prepare Alan Mann Racing Fords. And Ian Wood, sixth grid position, sharing that third row with him. David Sala, there's a familiar name.
From Victoria.
So and another man, Anthony, in 10th grid position in car number 54. Compare this with the Suzuki times that are about another 10 seconds slower than, say, David Sala, the best of the Suzukis, who's on 7th grid position. And some interesting ones there. Findlay Luff, which combines almost two driver training schools. Peter Findlay and
did occur to me.
And Ian Luff. Has nothing to do with either of them, of course. Mark Zonneveld in car number 12 is in 18th grid position. So it's a big field as well, David.
It is, yes, a capacity field, almost a full grid, and a big race for the guys. First time here at Eastern Creek, so whoever sets the fastest lap will set the lap record.
And 25 entered for this race, and that's not a bad way to start off a category.
Particularly when we've got vehicles coming from Queensland and New South Wales.
So in simple form, an old early Commodore, a 4.2 litre V8, a Toyota Supra gearbox to take the twist, all the torque from it. If you run ROH wheels, the sponsor reckons you're lovely, and they give you a bonus. And you run American Hoosier racing tyres, which nobody outside of about Indiana knows anything about. I did once see a Hoosier jacket that a motoring journalist bought, and it was the worst jacket I'd ever seen in my life, but they might have changed their colours since then.
I understand a very well-known team manager of one of the leading 12-hour teams in outright category has some Hoosier tyres in his garage.
Well, there we go.
So we might be seeing something. VC and VH.
They are a very well-known name in Central America around Speedway and so on. Very highly respected too, as they get ready for the go.
Okay, standing by for a interesting little
reflex Commodores.
Yes, into turn one.
These
depends on the braveness of the drivers as to whether they have a squeeze on the brakes or whether they just have a confidence lift.
These will jump from the line. 4.2 litres of V8 to bump them away.
And some would say making all the right noises. Still a bit of sorting out the back of the grid. The green flag's raised by the official, which means we're ready for a race start. 6 laps coming our way. And away we go, and a pretty even start by both Carlos and Baxter, but I think it's going to be, no, it's Baxter in the number 2 car, Gary Baxter, all the way from South Australia, so far so good. But of course, Stephen Carlos is on the inside. All right, a whole bunch of Commodores with one mark racer today, very interesting. Still side by side around turn 1, not a huge amount of speed up though, but it looks like it's Baxter taking the advantage, and somebody out on the dirt, not a good place to be, one of the yellow Commodores, but everybody so far so good. No, there's a bit of a touch on there, a bit of biffo. Number 6 gets it all wrong, I'm afraid. Stephen Carlos was first and he was second. Now he's somewhere he shouldn't be. And number 9, who had put the wheel off the dirt there, is going absolutely berserk. Vince Gatt has sort of found some amazing form from somewhere. Perhaps he's got a turbo boost switch. Whatever happened, he's come rushing through from the board. Look at this, 5 abreast over the hill.
Thoroughbreds are sort of like Suzuki Racing, but a little bit more powerful, a bit more grunt, and somebody's pulling off to retire. In fact, it's the number 6 car, Stephen Carlos. The pole position holder has not gone half a lap. It's a long way to come to go half a lap. There's another race this afternoon. Looks like our race leader is number 2, and he's off on the dirt. Hey guys, this is supposed to be a grippier track, and you've got these marvellous Hoosier tyres we've been talking about. We're only half a lap into the race, and maybe they need to warm up a bit. Maybe they go a little bit better when they're a bit hotter.
And as you know, if you've got a hot race tyre and you get it out on the dirt, it's not a very friendly thing to do to it. You usually end up picking up a bit of dirt.
Yep.
And there, car number 18, looking very adventurous, David Sala. Well, you'd expect it. David Sala's been around a good long time in these sorts of things, sedans, production cars and so on.
Some cars, I understand, we might go a little bit quicker than others. It's not happening yet. There's 6 or 7 cars in the field actually running 5-litre engines. They're from New South Wales. They've been running as sport sedans, but to boost the field a little bit and have a bit of fun with their smaller engine cousins, they've been invited to run. Anyway, it's 4.2-litre looking good at the moment. Our race setter still appears to be the number 2 car of Gary Baxter. And pretty much line of stern down the straight, no overtaking opportunities at the moment. Still car 18 in second, Sala, 15 is Alan Mann, and in number 3 that's the Ian Wood car. Ian Wood from Victoria. So a mixture of Victorians or Mexicans, if you like, and New South Welshmen holding sway, but already after 1 lap, 5 to go. Pretty handy lead of what is ostensibly an equal category, or a pretty close category. Getting very loose down there in turn 1, side by side. Remarkably good turn-in from the number 9 machine from Vince Gatz, Commodore. He's got the advantage, though, and still getting nicely sideways. I get a bit more sideways than HQs. I rather suspect this is one of the reasons that some of the guys go to this category, because they can all that nice V8 type horsepower under the right foot. They're easy to hang the tail out a bit. A pretty brave move there by number 3. Ian Wood decides he wants to go and do something about this is Stephen Carlos. No, it's not. No, in fact, it's number 15. I was confused with the white cars. It's Alan Marin. So they're getting pretty well stuck into it. There's all sorts of little individual dices happening right the way through the field. Not unusually for this one make type of racing. You get all sorts of things that get a bit radical in the midfield. The guys sort of trying to defend their position and trying to just get a little bit further up the field. But certainly it's quiet at the top end, but 66 at the moment of the last time round. That's Timmins. He was running 5th, still running a strong 5th. Under plenty of pressure, though. Lots of attention at the moment as they're making their way down from the Corporate Hill hairpin. Around this quite quick series of corners here, you've got to get it right if you can. You can't afford to go in too deep under brakes, because you mark up the entry to this corner they're in now, because this is the corner preceding the main straight. And if they get that wrong, they can lose 400 or 500 revs. That can equate to 5 or 6 or more kilometres per hour. And that can mean somebody can slipstream them and pick up a position. So pretty important to get the entry to that corner right. A lot of these guys would know that. A great majority of the guys running here today would not know that, because they're first timers at Eastern Creek, as evidenced by the South Australian and Victorian signs on the cars. Okay, now they're getting stuck into it now. They've done pretty well in qualifying, but they're sliding the cars around turn 1. We've been talking today in other categories about being brave in negotiating turn 1 in Suzukis, and you have to be. These cars, of course, are a bit tied down. They run control suspensions, a Bilstein package, in fact, a Bilstein suspension package, and as far as the engines are concerned, the 4.2-litre V8 and controlled heads and roller rockers. And strangely enough, most of these vehicles running Toyota Supra gearboxes, strangely. Apparently they can handle the torque pretty well, and they're fairly easily available. So Toyota gearboxes and HSV front brakes, pretty much standard Commodore brakes from the back. About $35,000, as we said, to get into one of these cars with all the new componentry. And somebody's got the headlights ablaze. Somebody's getting pretty anxious down here. Why am I not surprised? It's Vince Gatt. He's been fairly radical all of the race, very aggressive so far. He had that huge lose at about 180 kilometres per hour in turn 1, but he's been coming back now. The car's looking a bit loose though. He's working the back tyres very, very hard. These Hoosiers might be good tyres. What's he going to do? He's having a look down the inside, but 15 quite wisely. Alan Marin. But I was going to say, he's holding his line and protecting his line pretty well, but number 9, there's Vince Gatt, the yellow Commodore, with the headlights ablaze, who's having a look down the inside. So I would have to say the redness has descended just a fraction, judging by... But no, as I speak, 15 does it all wrong. So what can I say? I have to congratulate Vince Gatt. The pressure has worked, because the 15 car, Alan Marin, you saw him just understeer. He slid wide. The car just did not want to turn into that left-hander at the back of the circuit. And Vitsa, oh, how about this one? On the main straight at full noise. Gets on the right-hand side of the track, 2 wheels on the dirt. Don't know why, but interesting drive here from the number 9 car, Big Scat, but it's working for him, isn't it? He's up to 3rd place now, while Baxter and Sala having a pretty lonely run at the sharp end of the field still. Okay, lots of good dices happening midfield, as is always the case. So Marin in the 15 car, back on the track, but now under pretty close attention. In fact, he's lost 1 position now to 66. 66, of course, is Phil Timmins. Phil Timmins now picks up 1 more place, so that puts him up into 4th place. So we've got 3 down, half distance of this motor race, a bit over half distance, and no problems as far as our race leaders are concerned. Baxter and Sala just going round and round and round. In 1 minute 51, it's interesting because Baxter's race leader's lap time has dropped by a second compared to David Sala. The other's running 1 minute 53 to 54, so clearly David Sala is on a bit of a charge. Plenty of dust on the screen, can't see why, but quite clearly somebody's been putting, some more people have been putting wheels off the dirt. So maybe the Hoosiers have come up to temperature. They've been doing a good job for a few laps, but now that because they've been caned a little bit, perhaps they've been they're getting a bit loose and a bit skatey well.
Baxter set a new lap record, and he did it on lap 2. They're now, of course, on lap 4 in this 6-lapper, and he with a lead of 2.14 seconds. So Baxter in car 2 leads David Sala, car number 18, and doing a good job too. Like any racing, it all looks sometimes as though you just get stuck into it and you go wild, but actually an enormous amount of precision needed to optimise everything you do. You must get your apexes and minimise the wheel spin, get everything right, and it's often the smooth-looking one, as with most sports, that make it look easiest and to do it best. So Baxter doing a great job. He completes 4 now. Sala follows him across the line, 2.7 seconds in arrears, so going out a little bit. Gap then follows, and there's 4.9 seconds to him, 1.93 to Timmins, and 2.3 seconds to McInnes in car number 11 in 5th place, and Marin in 6th place in car number 15. So looking at 11, that's McInnes in 5th place. Now immediately behind him is Marin in car number 15. His target to move forward is Timmins in car number 66.
Yeah, they've definitely settled down a bit now, those mid-race attacks and dices. I think that the tyres are a little bit how you're going.
And one driver pulling up too. In fact, I often think that putting your tyres in as a one-make series tyre, nominated tyre, has very much a downside as well as an upside. You certainly move a lot of product, but it's an easy thing to blame for errors. It's an easy thing to blame for problems. You have to have a lot of faith in the product and back it up very well to put it to this sort of torture. The other good side about it is that you often learn things out of this sort of accelerated testing that can improve the product that you sell for the road or indeed for the racetrack as well.
This tyre was specifically developed by Hoosier for this category, so they're pretty keen to get a leg into the Australian racing scene, and clearly they would be, I would suggest, have tyre technicians available. Now we're having a close look at the wear rates and the temperatures and so on of these tyres, particularly at a place like Eastern Creek, which is just fast, and of course it has that very high-speed left-hand turn.
Well, that's the case with the Kumho tyres in the Suzuki Cup too, and they look at them very closely. They're monitoring the wear and so on, and certainly able to improve the tyres if they need to be improved from what they learn, as I say, in this very accelerated form of testing. So 5 laps completed now. They're on the final 3.93 kilometres around Eastern Creek, and the field being led by Baxter, this car, in this Reflex Commodore Cup.
Yes, still about a 2.5 second gap back to David Sala, and is almost 5 seconds back to Gat, and a further 5 seconds back to Timmins. So they've pretty much settled down now. Timmins under a little bit of pressure potentially from McInnes for that 5th position, just a little over a second behind, but clearly all the vision we're seeing of the cars on the track are getting just a little bit loose. They're not turning in quite as crisply as they were 5 laps ago, as we'd quite expect, and a little bit of oversteer creeping into all of the corners, except for our race leader, who's driving it very straight, and particularly in these controlled tyre situations, these non-race slick tyre situations, but towards the end of the race you just have to look after them. It's remarkable, Will, that going back to the Suzuki Cup and in these one tyre series, the guys that are driving them straighter are getting rewarded.
Oh yes, and people often feel that tread's got something to do with grip. The only time tread's got anything to do, anything positive to do, is getting water out from between the tyre and the road surface. Other than that, it's a disadvantage. If you could suddenly grow tread when it rained, we'd all have treadless tyres like race cars do.
Absolutely. A couple of corners to go, a couple of wiggles, in fact, coming off the Corporate Hill hairpin for the final time. Commodore Cup it is, the Australian Commodore Cup. Essentially, of course, it's an East Coast of Australia series. They've run at all of the racetracks here. They've run over in South Australia as well. And looking forward to 2 more rounds. In fact, final few hundred metres for Baxter. In car number 2, Gary Baxter. And it's been a good journey for him all the way from South Australia. 100 metres to go. Checkered flag, takes the checkered flag. A good run for him. Virtually a flag-to-flag victory. And try as he might, David Sala could only pick up 2nd place. 3rd, Gat in the number 9 machine, and in 4th place. We're waiting for 4th to come across yet. A few seconds to go. 4th is Timmins in car number 66. That's one of the V8 cars. And in 5th, McGuinness, car number 11. 6th is Wood.
A 3-second margin then in victory to Baxter in car number 2, and those booming compact little 4.2-litre V8s doing a very good job, as was Baxter, who certainly showed everybody how to do that neat and tidily as ever, as well as getting all your lines right. And this confirms the results, just that under 3 seconds between the 1st and 2nd place. Vince Gatt taking up the other podium position, Phil Timmins and Andrew McInnes rounding out the top 5. And the next 5 then saw us through with Anthony, I think it's Marin. Oh, that's man in 54. And David Marshall, David Gittis and Ian McAllister rounding out the top 10, some 25.4 seconds away from the race winner Baxter. So a fairly entertaining race there in the Commodore V8s. And I don't suppose you could get a greater contrast than an older family or taxi or fleet-used Australian vehicle, which is what most of those cars were, to go to Porsches, the pedigreed German car. But that's what we go to next, round 1, here at Eastern Creek of the Porsche Cup.
The defending Porsche Cup champion, Wayne Park, is on pole position for this, the final round of the Porsche Cup at Eastern Creek. Alongside him is Chris Hones, just 1 second behind. Then on the 2nd row of the grid comes the man who's fighting for the championship lead this time round, Jeff Morgan, and alongside him Anthony Tratt. Then comes Peter Harburg, and alongside him Greg Keane.
And in position number 7, Colin Ivory, and he's 9:30. Alongside him, Martin Wagg, a latecomer to the grid in his RSR. Out of position number 9, David Withers in another RSR. And then the Class B champion already won the championship. Out of position number 10, that's Steve Webb.
Alongside, on the next row of the grid is Roger Patterson. Then comes Johnny Carl Bletzer. Then Stephen Leonard, Rob Pennyfather, Chris Stannard and Roger Patterson. All in ready for the start. 16 of these horizontally opposed Porsches, between 3 litres and 3.8 litres, ready for the start of this, the final round of the Porsche Cup for 1995. They're in the starters' hands. Lights ready to go. Wayne Park on pole position. Revs rise, they're racing. Park, a sensational start. Hones moves right across in front of Jeff Morgan. Morgan in the white car drops back into 3rd. Along, up comes car 4. And there's one off already.
We've got a couple off. Oh, yes, a couple of cars have gone through the braking marker. It's number 9 has done it all wrong. David Withers has had a problem. The car doesn't look terribly badly damaged, except for the rear end of the car. 22 involved there as well. Steve Webb. Well, that's a bit of a shame for Steve. Luckily, Steve Webb has already clinched the Class B championship, and he didn't need to start like that. So number 9 is being attended to at the moment. The field goes on its way. The marshals are with the stricken car, back with our race fleet. Not surprisingly, it's Wayne Park out there, but we've got a humdinger happening for 2nd place as well. Chris Hones, a sometime racer this year, and a very experienced Porsche Cup racer. He's done many championships. He's a Porsche specialist. He's a professional Porsche race driver, actually, but he's had sporadic appearances this year. He's certainly shown he's lost none of his ability. A spectacular flame out the back of the car, and he's in 2nd place at the moment. Leading car 44, the green machine, that's Anthony Tratt, who's improving with every run and had a terrific run at Winton a couple of weeks ago. Don't worry about 4th place there, just at the rear of your picture there, the gaily painted Porsche, just just in the 4th position there. That's our championship elect leader. He's just taking a pretty conservative run today.
Morgan.
Jeff Morgan. It's a guy who cannot be beaten, basically. All he has to do is finish today to win the Australian Porsche Cup Championship. But Wayne Parker's had a pretty rotten run this year, John Smales. He's won just about as many races as Jeff Morgan, but not the right ones, not the point-scoring ones.
Indeed. They both had 7 wins in the championship so far, but regrettably for Park, they've been the 7 wrong races. As now, Morgan has a look around, car 44, jumps out of the slipstream, coming down on Holmes. On the outside here into the fast turn 1, it's not a place to pass. And in fact, there's a yellow flag out, followed by a green for that lose on the starting lap. So Morgan forced to drop back in behind. But a sensational challenge here for 2nd position.
That is a bit of a worry, actually, but it's one of the few places around Eastern Creek that if you get a good run on the main straight, you get a slipstream, you can actually set through on the brakes into turn 1 if you're brave enough. Of course, with the yellow flag out, that's no overtaking allowed while the yellow flag is out. And hopefully they'll clean that stricken car. Quite spectacular flames out of the back of the Chris Holmes car. Not too many of the other ones are doing it. Doesn't matter. Whatever his mechanics have done to the vehicle, it obviously works well because it's pretty quick around the back. And as I said, hasn't done too many races this year, but he is a Porsche specialist.
Holmes, of course, is driving a turbocharged car, hence the flames coming out of the back of the motor car. He's burning off a lot of excess fuel.
And as you said before, John, an interesting mix of vehicles ranging from 3.5s up to 3.8s, even a 3-litre car, but of course that's a turbocharged machine. That's the Chris Holmes car, in fact. And there's just one conventional car, shall I say. That's the Russell Patterson Class C car from Tasmania, of course, running a front-engined configuration. But all the rest of them are the rear-enders, as it were, the cars that take just a little bit of skill, a little bit more than average skill to drive for their rear-engine configuration. Even in race setup, they can still bite very badly, particularly the early model Porsches. So they take a lot of concentration, a little bit more skill than you might ordinarily expect. They're certainly having the big go. That's where the dice at this race is. We said that Jeff Morgan was running conservatively. We take that all back.
Morgan now, and it's all over the track trying to find a way around Tratt, who really blocked Morgan coming down there. Morgan now goes for the outside again. Not a great place to pass. Morgan, of course, entered in the 12-hour race as well in one of the Clubman cars.
Looks for an outside run, but he's blocked. Tratt's the one that's blocked there. Morgan forced to go wide, but certainly Morgan started off conservatively, but he wants to know about improving his position now. He knows all he has to do to finish, to win the championship is to finish, but of course it'd be nice to finish a bit further up the leaderboard as well. So there he is, our champion-elect in the Morgan and Banks car, the gaily painted Porsche. As you said, he's going to be a busy guy today, or this weekend he'll be jumping into a Porsche of a different nature. But of course, he's just totally focused at the moment on trying to improve his position. Wayne Parker's absolutely lit off into the distance. He's just disappeared. A point to prove, I'd have to say, for Wayne Park. He's had a bit of rotten luck this year. He's been as quick as anybody, probably the quickest driver most consistently, and he's certainly proving that today. But it's the dice to 2nd at the moment, I guess 2nd, 3rd and 4th. Pretty much mile astern as they make their way around the back of the circuit. On this resurfaced Eastern Creek surface, all of the categories here finding perhaps 1 or 2 seconds improvement. As Tratt has another look down the inside of the Corporate Hill hairpin, seen of many passing manoeuvres, one of the few overtaking opportunities here, but no. Too smart is Chris Holmes. I think he's got his tracks pretty well covered. So they're just...
Holmes, in fact, is driving a pretty canny race, but he's blocking in the corners. He's taking the very conservative line into the corners and then booting that big turbo on the way out. And he's certainly got more exit speed on just about any corner on this track. So it's difficult for the other guys to find a way around in terms of Holmes' ability to actually leap out of a corner. Now Morgan has another go at Tratt. Again, not quite fast enough. He won't go for the outside there. Possibly try to hook in under brakes at the top end of the circuit here on turn 2. Yep, going for the inside this time, but no way he's going to risk that braking manoeuvre either. Meantime, watch Holmes. Pulls him right up and then boots the thing out of this corner, and away he goes again. Yep. Meantime, Park is just leaping away. He's now down to a 1:37.5 second lap against Holmes' best time of 1:39.5. So 2 seconds a lap between them.
So Wayne Park absolutely dominant here at Eastern Creek in this last round of the Australian Porsche Cup. 2 seconds a lap faster. That's quite remarkable. The guys running 2nd, 3rd and 4th on screen at the moment, all running about the same sorts of lap times. But of course that could be because Holmes is dictating the pace of the race. It's absolutely clear here that he's just stroking it in nice and carefully, saying bye guys, lights up the turbo and away he goes. But if you can do it, that's great. That's called gamesmanship. It's called motor racing. If you've got the opportunity to do it, well, why not? John Bowers demonstrated on many occasions in Group A Tour that if you've got the race line, you can protect it. And that's exactly what Chris Hones is doing, using the horsepower very well and driving the car very smartly as well, I might add. It's not just a matter of point and squirt, but I would have to suggest that it's perhaps a little bit frustrating for the guys behind him. I think just Tratt and Morgan perhaps a little bit frustrated. I think that's a bit evident now. John, I think they've just backed off the pace a second or so each. They're just in cruise mode at the moment, as it were, as far as this race is concerned.
Well, Morgan knows that he's got the championship in the bag, and at this stage he's not going to be able to challenge Wayne Park for the lead in an 8-lap event. There goes Wayne Park now, just squirming the Porsche through turn 1, doing about 180, maybe 190 kilometres an hour, 5th gear corner. Then the race for second place behind them. Jeff Morgan there, 40-ish, Sydney businessman, excellent competitor, prepares his cars absolutely beautifully, has got Brad Jones and John Smith both driving with him in the 12-hour race tomorrow. So he knows how to pick his teammates as well.
And an absolute dyed-in-the-wool Porsche enthusiast. You just don't get any more enthusiastic than Jeffrey Morgan, who's a hell of a nice guy and a very competent driver.
Started racing the cars in 1986. Oh, as now Hones really gets it wide, gives maybe an opportunity to Tratt, but Tratt just a little too far back to take advantage of it.
I still can't help but feel that he's still having a bit of a play. He's just dictating the pace of the race, dictating his comfortable pace, and using the power of the turbo power. So Tratt's a big improver, as I said, the last couple of rounds. He's really come on very, very strongly.
Well, the feeling is that if you got any closer to Hones, you'd probably need a paint job, wouldn't you? A new paint job on your car with the amount of paint that would be taken off by that fire.
I think you're right. I think you might find the odd scorch mark on the front of Anthony Tratt's car. But still pretty much line astern again, out of the Corporate Hill area, the middle part of this Eastern Creek racetrack. Chris Hones gets away a little bit in some of the twistier bits, and then under brakes, Tratt closes up again. Here we go onto the straight. This is always the telling factor. There's the gap from our race leader. The visual gap for a race leader back to second, third and fourth. Wayne Park, I think he's just having fun today. Wayne Park doing 38s now.
Here comes Tratt down the outside. Can't do it there. Hones blocks his line again. I mean, takes his line again, I'm sorry. And
you were right first time.
Yeah, Tratt looks for the inside run down into the braking area. Can't do it. Hones again down the inside. And look at this. Tratt, frustrated, goes through on the outside and takes it over. Now let's see whether Tratt can start to make the move on Wayne Park, who's backed off a little bit and brought the gap back to them. Hones now, just look at the way that blue Porsche jumps out of the corner. Now all over the back of Tratt. And now it's Tratt's turn to block the corners in front of Hones. Hones goes for the inside run. He's got the faster car, but Tratt probably has got a higher cornering speed.
Look at this, though, John Smiles. I fully expected Tratt to run away. He seemed to be a very frustrated driver. I think he'd actually run away, but look at Hones. I think Hones was just dictating his own pace. He was just having a bit of fun. I can't catch Wayne Park. I'll just have a bit of a play with these guys back here. But now Tratt's in front. He's not getting away from Hones. In fact, he's in a bit of danger here. Hones has just turned the wick up a little bit, probably literally and metaphorically, and just driving out a little bit harder. And still, Jeff Morgan is just lurking there. I don't think not going to take any risks. He's just waiting there to see what's going to unfold in front of him. But certainly Tratt has moved up the position. He can now get into defence mode as well. The straight will be the teller. We're on the middle part of the circuit at the moment. Already Hones is lurking. Can just about throw a blanket over them. A couple of feet difference. Now this is the telling part. Getting a good entry around this corner is all important. Top speed running out wide. Bringing the cars back in tight again. Oh, that was a brave move. Unbelievably brave move by Hones. He wasn't waiting for the straight to use the turbo power. He was pretty keen to get right on with it here. It's not over yet, though. He's got more power on the straight. He's right in a slipstreaming position at the moment. What's he going to do? Look at this, 180 kilometres per hour. Line astern, but I think Tratt's got his measure. He certainly has. Tratt very brave under brakes. So a very brave move there by Chris Hones. Didn't come off, but serving notice and giving a... Now Jeff Morgan's playing there. So has Chris Hones got a problem, or is he just giving it away or giving it up slightly? Jeff Morgan has got all inspired now. He's been watching these shenanigans, of course, from not very far. He's just sitting one out, one back and watching all that happen in front of him. He knows he's a champion, but of course he's a race driver as well. Whether he's going to take any risks or not, I don't know. Only a couple of laps to go, so 2 laps to go for Jeff Morgan to try and improve his position. And same deal for Chris Hones, who, as I said, a sometime racer, lost none of his ability. I don't know if he's taken by surprise or not. I really believe with that move at the top of the straight that he did not expect to be gazumped by Tratt at turn 2 a couple of laps ago. Hence that rather adventurous move on the start of the straight. They're back about the same part of the circuit, or around Corporate Hill at the moment, actually. And Wayne Park just goes on his merry way. He's brought his times back to about 1 minute 38. But Tratt, Hones and Morgan have brought their times back to 1 minute 40. So they've come back a second or so themselves. I don't know whether it's a track condition or what, but anyway, it's all happening as Hones gets it sideways. He certainly wants to know. We've got some traffic. That's the situation there. And the first two cars are through. Tratt and Hones are through, but he certainly stepped on the gas in a big way and got the tail sliding right out on the Porsche. Not always a good idea, because sometimes they get out and they're not really keen. And coming back, and again, the same as before. He feels he's very fast through there. Obviously he is. Gets it sideways over. Of course, wheel spin means nothing. You can see Tratt pull away from him. This will be the last lap. 1 lap to go. Anthony Tratt under all sorts of pressure, and Chris Hones giving him plenty. And Wayne Park's just cruising around, having a lovely, quiet run, proving a few points, I guess, as to who may or may not be the fastest driver in the championship. But Tratt well clear of Hones this time around. Around that daunting turn 1 with the cars, you can see they squat down at the rear and they get just a little bit tippy-toey. You're very got to be very circumspect in that corner there. But certainly Anthony Tratt very late braking there. The last time he had to look at that corner, making sure he was well clear of Chris Hones. Chris Hones has settled it down. I think they've given it that big burst a couple of laps out. I think they might just settle it down now. We've still got half a lap to go, but no, I don't think so. Wayne Park just about a quarter of a lap to go, and he's got to be taking yet another checkered flag. A not unfamiliar sight for Wayne Park this year, but the luck hasn't gone his way. He has thrilled spectators with his drives through from the rear of the field and midfield after problems, but not to worry. He's the defending champion. At least he has some points on the board, and he's driven a terrific race here. A lonely race, but a very classy race for Wayne Park, who of course be running in the 12-hour race as well, be getting to a car that's totally different in his R6 Falcon, and of course he'll be back in a good race here as well. But Porsches is what we're about now. Porsches is what Wayne Park has been about for a few years now, and done very well indeed. So not winning the championship, but certainly doing a great job here. A couple of corners to go for Wayne Park for checkered flag, and a couple of corners to go to confirm our new Australian Porsche Cup champion for 1995. So race leader Wayne Park on the straight now. Here he comes, a flag to flag, well, we've got to say a lights to flag victory these days. Wayne Park, terrific drive, started from pole position, did it totally easily. Here he comes now, a couple of 100 metres to go. Wayne Park takes the win, but who's going to finish second, third, fourth, etc.? Is it going to be Tratt? I reckon it will be, yes,
Chris Hones.
Chris Hones on the line.
Second place from Anthony Tratt, with Jeff Morgan in fourth position to win the Porsche Cup for 1995.
Well, a great comeback for Wayne Park from the retirement that he had at Winton to wrap up the race in the championship. Chris Hones, Tratt, Jeff Morgan really putting it in. Jeff Morgan, of course, head of that Morgan and Banks recruitment company, a public company, so an important businessman as well. And there, the other 5 rounding out the top 10 of what was a very expensive race. A very quick and entertaining one too.
Welcome back to Eastern Creek into the 12-hour production classic. And after a very, very heavy season of touring car racing in Australia, the last thing you'd expect to do is to find Dick Johnson coming out for a weekend's drive. Dick, what in goodness name has brought you out for this race?
Obviously nice weather, I'd say, and it's always good fun to be driving around it for 12 hours in these particular cars. The more you do, obviously the better you're going to get, and we've got some fairly long races coming up very shortly, and to be able to get a bit of race practice in does you a lot of good.
Well, you've got Bow in the car with you. How much of the racing are you going to let him do, and how much are you going to take yourself?
Well, given the point that the car will go all day, I'd say we'll do about 6 hours apiece, you know, because we intend to run about just over hour and a half stints. So at the end of the day, that sort of gives each driver around about 6 hours driving.
Compare, if you will, these Mazda RX-7s to your Group A Falcon.
Well, they're considerably easier to drive because the speeds are nowhere near as quick as what the Falcon is, but certainly the Falcon is a more physical car to drive. These are basically, they're just a road car running around a racetrack, where the Falcon is really an out-and-out race car.
Well, can these things bite you just the same?
Oh, they can bite you, all right. You've really got to sort of concentrate fairly well with them, but everything happens sort of in slow motion by comparison to what the touring cars do.
Dick, when you accepted the drive with Mazda, they'd won the event 3 times, and the Porsches before had never had their measure. Now you've got Porsches 1, 2, 3 on the grid in front of the 2 Mazdas. Had you expected that?
In qualifying, yes. Qualifying for a 12-hour race doesn't mean an awful lot. It doesn't matter whether you're 1st or 10th or 20th on the grid. 12 hours is a long way, and there's a lot of factors in a 12-hour race that don't normally come into the short races. When you consider that one car will probably do an hour and 35 or 40 minutes on a fuel tank, the other will have to do, so I think the other Porsches now will only do about an hour 15, an hour 20. So that puts them into a situation where they've got to have more pit stops. And then you've got the tyre situation coming in it, which around here is going to be fairly tough because they've just resurfaced the track and it is really giving the tyres curry. So that's another factor you've got to look at. And of course, as always, brakes. Now, brakes on a production car normally are a little bit suspect when you put them on a racetrack. But thank heavens ours are fine, but I hope some of the others aren't.
Dick Johnson, we'll see him at 6 p.m. tomorrow night.
And 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I'm really looking forward to that too, because it should be an absolute beauty. And the fact that the 12-hour cars are doing their last stint out on the track now, and we'll be joining them very shortly to have a look through all the classes, to see what the form is, who the competitors are, what sort of machines and people taking on this Eastern Creek 12-hour. But before we do that, we have a very important engagement with Super Tourers, the new quick touring car category in Australia, the 2-litre cars. Let's have a look at this, the way they performed in a brief excerpt from their race this morning. Jump away from the start was Paul Morris, ahead of pole position holder Jim Richards. Jim Richards took pole position for both of the Super Touring races here. They qualify for each race in separate qualifying sessions. Paul Morris, if he can lock this one up, will lock up the series. And he had the opportunity to do that in the last round at Winton, but he wasn't able to do it, as Richards has already been given some curry, not only by Paul Morris, but by the four-wheel drive of Brad Jones. So Brad Jones in the Audi Quattro, looking at the pole position holder and losing ground to the man that jumped best away from the front row of the grid, Paul Morris. Stephen Richards there. And Greg Murphy in the car rapidly repaired from Winton. In Winton a couple of weeks ago, he went front end in, straight on off the back sweeper, and very badly damaged the car. So badly, in fact, that when the front went in, it twisted and shattered the body, and the impact was tough enough to shatter the rear window as well. But the car, which is a very complex one, nicely repaired now, and Murphy says it's working really well. That car's not working so well. Tyre, it must be. Look, it's all loose on the left side, I reckon, left rear, and very busy, in fact. Pulling it up, you can see the right tyres are okay, but very bad luck for a man who could have locked up the series and done it all correctly in terms of his own driving, but has to leave it till the second Super Touring race here at Eastern Creek later today. So working his way forward at this stage is Murphy in that repaired Audi. He's making very good work of it, seeming to fall away from the lead somewhat. Jim Richards, the man who was on pole position. Ellery is going well in his BMW, but this is one of the 406 Peugeots, and Jeff Full goes very well in that too. So, in fact, Jeff Full's come into that Peugeot team in recent times and been doing a very good job. Greg Murphy on the charge. He was only 7th fastest and already working his way forward. Jeff Brabham didn't get away very smartly, and he was in a very tardy grid position. And there you can see Jeff Full getting tangled up with Stephen Ellery in the Shellgrave car. Now, Ellery has been battling with Graham Moore for honours in the privateer category. But as they went on, the lead inherited by Brad Jones in the Audi number 18. And he led as they went out onto the final lap, 18. And Greg Murphy had pulled up a long way from his 7th grid position. His starting position, wasn't able to get quite close enough, though, to threaten for the win. But all the time over the last few laps, closing on his teammate, the Albury man, Greg Jones from New Zealand, and making it a four-wheel drive, an Audi 1-2 here at Eastern Creek in the last round, the first race of the last round of the Super Touring Championship that debuted here in 1994. Their initial race was here, and they come across the line for a nice formation finish. Victory to Brad Jones from Greg Murphy, Audi 1-2. And then Jeff Brabham in 83, and Stephen Richards went well. So it was a pretty entertaining race, that 18 laps of the Super Touring race. So they have another race here this afternoon. At the moment, the 12-hour cars are out on the track. They have a 20-minute final warm-up session, just really testing and to some degree bedding in components, but testing that everything that they've changed in the car, that they've altered. For instance, in one of the Porsches, our windscreen's sandblasted. We've taken the windscreen out, had a bit of a stone chip and so on, so they're bunging in a brand new windscreen, but a lot of mechanical components too, checked over and changed for various reasons. So a lot of that going out on the track now, and it's time for us to have a look at the 12-hour cars and the various classes that are competing. As always with a motor race, there's a lot of attention paid to the outright winners, but there are lots of other very important classes. For instance, in Class A, small cars, up to 1.85 litres, we have Toyota Corolla GTI, 4 of them, Suzuki GTI, 4 of them, Suzuki Baleno, a new model from them, and a Ford Laser TX3. Now, grabbing pole position, you recognise the name at the bottom end of the window there, Brame, who's won this class in his own GTI for the last 4 years. He's going with Darren Palmer in a car that Father Ross has built in recent times. This is its debut outing. They tested at Winton a couple of weeks ago, and Mark Brame, a very hot runner, putting it on pole position in the class, and also 22nd outright. Although it's one of the smallest cars in the race, it's actually only 1,300 odd cc's, and within 0.2 of a second of it is car 43 in the class and car 98, another GTI and a Ford Laser TX3. But car number 22 is the Subaru WRX, I think. But as indeed it is, running in the turbo class, and it was the fastest car in that class. If we've got the right WRX. No, in fact, it's John Burke and Morton and Jones in number 20 that's the quickest one of those. 22 is further down, it's 19th fastest. Hurst and Hurst, husband and wife, and Lighthead, or Lighthead, and that Subaru Impreza has qualified 4th in the turbo class. But in that turbo class, again, nice variety of cars. 2 Impreza WRXs, so constant 4-wheel drive turbo on a 1.8 litre engine, and Volvo with their 850 Turbo 5R, their front-wheel drive car. Both of them from the Volvo factory, Peter Brock and Tony Scott, Englishman Wynne Percy and rally driver Ed Ordinsky sharing those. They'll all be out chasing this car, number 22, and the other Impreza of John Burke and David Morton. When we look at the outright class, well, we look at Porsche and Mazda. And Porsche number 3 is, of course, the fastest car in the race. Race cam that we'll be using tomorrow in one of the Volvos. And this one of the 4 cars running in the turbo and or 4-wheel drive high-performance class. A sort of view that we'll have from the Peter Brock, Tony Scott car 05 tomorrow. And in deference to that, the other Volvo is 06, the entrant Volvo 850 Racing, Wynne Percy, Ed Ordinsky. Be really interesting to follow Ed Ordinsky because very talented racing driver and has been making a transition rather quickly to circuit racing and has been showing himself very adaptable indeed. A beautifully smooth Group N rally driver, winner of course of the recent Mobile Round Australia trial, and the Volvo people being kept very busy by running Super Tourers as well as cars in the 12-hour production race. So they're in both the major categories at Eastern Creek here this weekend. And now this is the grid for the way they will form up at 6 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be on air from 5:45. And when you look at those 6 top cars and the 15 top drivers, Mazda, of course, has won the race in 92, 93 and 94, but has qualified 4th, 5th and 6th. Porsche, taking the first 3 grid positions, has never won the race. There's just 1 second between the top 4 cars on the grid. Peter Fitzgerald, that's taken pole, has led every year. He's led the race in 3 different cars, in Supra, in which he won in 91, also in Commodore Group A and in Porsche for the last 2 years, but he's only won it that first year, 1991, at Mount Panorama Bathurst. Also in among the front runners, 3 other winners: Gary Walden, who won it in 92, 93 and 4, Alan Jones, who won in 92 and 3, John Smith, who led in those years, John Smith, who led in 92, 93. But 3 winners: Peter Fitzgerald in 91, Walden won it 2 years, 92-3, and Alan Jones in 93. And 3 drivers too who've taken pole position. Fitzgerald took it in 91, has repeated it 4 years later in 95. John Bowe was on pole in 92 and Mark Scaife in 93. What all of that says is it'll be a very fast, very competitive battle, one that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Have a look at some of the fun stuff in here, though. Mid-engine Honda NSX, over $200,000 worth, a homemade Australian clubman, light and low, and moderately powered by a 1.6-litre Toyota Corolla engine, best of the sports cars, and therefore heading off the Toyota MR2s. Then you see the best of the Subaru Imprezas. The best of the Volvos is Peter Brock, Tony Scott in their 05 car, and then the MR2, 11th grid position for car 2 by comparison with 8th for the PRB Clubman against which it's competing. More of the MR2s and the second 850 Volvo Turbo going very well. Car 9 that we will see a little bit later, has hit the wall in recent times, but Murray Carter there, and that's the Mazda, of course. My goodness, this is a stir for Mark Scaife. Mark Scaife sharing the car with Gary Walden. Scaife hasn't managed to win. He had the turbo blow up last year. Walden's won 2 years, 92 and 3, and led the race in 3 years, and the car is damaged. And very late before the start. Now that Mazda 626 leading its Class B, and then we come to the leading Class A car, 20th grid position, car number 40, the Suzuki GTI of Darren Palmer, Mark Brame. One of the Falcons there that runs pretty well, and indeed Falcon heading their particular class, and Nissan Pulsar, not the best of the Class B cars, headed by Mazda 626. Look out for those. So Mazda's got an interest in 2 classes running here. John Wright privately running his own Citroën BX, and frankly I think doing a pretty fair job too. Privateer entry, 27th grid position. They've snuck pretty comprehensively under the 2-minute mark and doing a pretty good job ahead of some pretty agile cars, the Suzuki GTIs and the Toyota Corolla GTIs. And it was Alan Grice driving that Mazda. For Gary Walden, Mark Scaife, Alan Grice, we were talking with him earlier, will not be a popular boy as he sits there and contemplates Alan Horsley. He's the backup driver for both cars, and by comparison with the chat he was having earlier today with me and also with John Smales, he'll be having to think of some very good chat when the car that is on 4th grid position, the second best of Mazda's effort, heads back to the garage for repair. Dick Johnson looking there along with a pile of horrified and apprehensive and disappointed Triple M Mazda team motorsport people. The cars had a pretty heavy thump. They had a pretty heavy thump at Surfers earlier this year, and when they had that thump at Surfers, they were able to repair a pretty badly damaged car. They got very busy. They had to go up to Brisbane and get parts overnight. The car took a big bang. I can't remember who damaged it up there, but it ran well the next day, and it ran very competitively. However, before a 12-hour, where things can get fractured and so on, you certainly don't want that happening. David, a real setback for the Mazda team.
I don't know whether they're going to repair the car here or take it to their own workshops. Being Sydney-based, it'd be easier to repair the car, but that's a terrible shame. And yeah, not a good start to their campaign, but an absorbing race coming up tomorrow. Always an absorbing race, but certainly a special one, particularly from the driver's viewpoint.
And that's when we'll be back with you at 6 a.m. on SBS Sport.
suddenly things start to look very good indeed for the Porsches. 3 Porsches in the first 3 positions. 2 Mazdas, now one of them crashed, uncharacteristically having to snap at the heels of the Porsches. And that goes for a magic race tomorrow. It really looks like it's going to be something very fast indeed. 5:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Set your alarm clocks, because that's when we'll be on air with 12 hours of the Eastern Creek Production Car Classic. See you then.